Let's get right into it. Number 10. Right now, there's a forest in Japan where cell phones lose signal and compasses spin in circles. It's called Aokigahara, and it sits at the base of Mount Fuji. Not a legend. Not an exaggeration for tourism. The volcanic soil underneath is so dense with iron deposits that magnetic compasses genuinely malfunction inside it. Locals have called it the Sea of Trees for centuries, because from above, the tree canopy looks like a rolling green ocean with no landmarks. Rangers still walk through every year, and every year they find belongings left behind on the forest floor. The trees grow so thick that sound barely travels more than a few feet, so the entire forest sits in near total silence. Compare that silence to standing inside a recording studio, except nobody built this one on purpose. Signs are nailed to trees near the entrance, gently urging visitors to reconsider and call a hotline instead. A forest that quiet shouldn't feel threatening. Somehow it does anyway. Number 9. There's a door in Turkmenistan that has been on fire since 1971, and nobody has ever managed to put it out. Not a metaphor. An actual crater, roughly 230 feet wide, burning continuously for over 5 decades. Soviet engineers drilling for gas accidentally collapsed the site into a sinkhole, and worried about methane poisoning nearby villages, decided to light it on fire, assuming it would burn out within a few weeks. It's still going. Locals call it the door to hell, and at night the glow is visible from miles away, lighting up the desert like a stadium with no walls. Compare it to leaving a stove burner on for 50 years and just deciding it's fine now. In 2022, the Turkmen president actually ordered officials to find a way to extinguish it, and as of the last update, engineers are still working on the problem. There's something almost impressive about a mistake that outlives the people who made it. Number 8. Somewhere off the coast of Italy sits an island that Italian law effectively keeps people away from, not because of crime, but because of centuries of buried disease. Poveglia in the Venetian lagoon was used as a quarantine station during outbreaks of plague, starting in the 1700s. Ships suspected of carrying infected passengers were diverted there before ever reaching Venice. Historical estimates suggest tens of thousands of bodies were buried or burned on the island over the centuries, though exact numbers are difficult to confirm. By some local accounts, as much as half the island's soil contains human remains. Compare the island's size under 7 acres to the sheer number of burials it reportedly absorbed, and the math gets uncomfortable fast. Access today is restricted, officially due to structural safety in the abandoned buildings, though the reputation does most of the deterring on its own. Funny how a place can stay empty for 100 years and somehow still feel crowded. Number 7. There's a lake in Cameroon that killed nearly 2,000 people in a single night without a single explosion, gunshot, or visible cause. In August 1986, Lake Nyos released a massive cloud of carbon dioxide that had been building silently beneath its surface for years. The gas, invisible and heavier than air, rolled down nearby valleys and suffocated people and livestock as they slept. Entire villages were found with no signs of struggle, just people who had simply stopped breathing. Scientists later explained the phenomenon as a limnic eruption, essentially a lake burping out a lethal cloud of trapped gas from volcanic activity deep below it. Comparing it to anything ordinary feels wrong, but imagine a bottle of soda that's been shaken for years finally popping open at the worst possible moment. Engineers have since installed degassing pipes to slowly release the buildup before it happens again. It's strange to think a body of water sitting perfectly still could be quietly rebuilding an invisible weapon underneath it. Number 6. If you sailed toward a certain patch of the North Pacific right now, you'd eventually hit a floating mass of garbage roughly twice the size of Texas. Not a myth passed around by environmentalists for shock value. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is a real, measurable accumulation of plastic debris trapped by ocean currents. Estimates put the total mass at around 80,000 metric tons, spread across a swirling gyre that's difficult to see from a boat, because most of the material has broken into small, cloudy fragments rather than obvious floating trash. Compare that weight to roughly the mass of 500 fully loaded Boeing 747s, just drifting indefinitely. Most of it isn't visible from satellite photos either, which somehow makes it worse. A garbage patch you can't even properly photograph is the kind of horror movie villain that doesn't need a jump scare. It's just there, growing slowly, one discarded bottle cap at a time. Number 5. Beneath the streets of Paris sit roughly 200 miles of tunnels containing the remains of an estimated 6 million people. Not a horror set, an actual historical solution to an overflowing cemetery crisis in the late 1700s. Paris ran out of burial space, and disease started spreading from mass graves seeping into nearby wells. The city's solution was to move the bones underground into old limestone quarries, stacking skulls and femurs into deliberate patterns along the tunnel walls. Officials began the transfers in 1786, and the process took decades to complete. Compare that number, 6 million, to the entire population of a mid-sized modern country, except here they're all stacked within walking distance of some of the most visited tourist attractions in the world. Only a small section is open to the public, and even that stretch takes over an hour to walk through. Most cities bury their history. Paris just kept walking on top of hers. Number 4. There's a research station in Antarctica where the sun doesn't rise for months, and the nearest human beings might as well be on another planet. The South Pole itself experiences roughly 6 months of continuous darkness during winter, and during that stretch, planes physically cannot land or take off due to the extreme cold. Anyone stationed there during that window is committed, no matter what happens medically or psychologically. Temperatures can drop below -100 degrees Fahrenheit. Compare that isolation to the International Space Station, which at least gets regular supply missions. Winter-over crews at some stations have historically numbered under 50 people, cut off from rescue for months at a stretch. Researchers have reported psychological effects similar to what NASA studies in astronauts, sometimes called the Antarctic stare, a kind of prolonged blank detachment. It's the one place on Earth where being rescued isn't a phone call away. It's a calendar problem. Number 3. Somewhere in Romania sits a set of caves that stayed completely sealed off from the outside world for roughly 5.5 million years, until construction workers accidentally broke through in 1986. Movile Cave has its own self-contained ecosystem, powered not by sunlight, but by chemosynthesis, meaning the entire food chain runs on chemical reactions instead of photosynthesis. Scientists have identified dozens of species inside, many of them blind, colorless, and found nowhere else on Earth. The air itself is low in oxygen, and considered toxic to humans without protective equipment during extended exposure. Compare that isolation to sealing a room in 1986, and only just now allowing anyone back inside. Only a small number of researchers have ever been permitted to enter, largely to preserve the ecosystem untouched. There's something deeply unsettling about an entire independent world existing quietly underground the whole time humanity built cities directly above it. Number 2. There's a town in Turkmenistan's neighbor, Kazakhstan, where a Cold War nuclear testing site left craters and radiation levels that remain measurable today, decades after the last detonation. The Semipalatinsk test site hosted 456 nuclear tests between 1949 and 1989, many conducted with minimal warning to nearby residents. Soviet officials often didn't fully evacuate surrounding villages, treating local populations essentially as unwitting subjects for radiation exposure studies. Long-term health effects, including elevated cancer and birth defect rates, have been documented in the region for generations afterward. Compare the test count, 456, to roughly 1 detonation every single month for 4 decades straight. Some areas remain restricted due to residual contamination even now. It's one thing to read about nuclear history in a textbook. It's another to know entire family lines are still living with the consequences of tests most of the world never even heard about. Number 1. If you stood at the edge of Louisiana's Lake Peigneur today, you'd see a calm, unremarkable lake. In 1980, that same lake swallowed an entire island's worth of land in a matter of hours. An oil drilling crew accidentally punched into an active salt mine directly beneath the lake, and the resulting hole acted like a drain plug pulled out of a bathtub. The lake, which had been shallow and freshwater, completely drained into the mine shaft below, reversing the flow of a nearby canal so violently it created a temporary waterfall, and pulled in barges, trucks, and part of an entire botanical garden. Astonishingly, no one died. The lake refilled over the following days, this time as much deeper saltwater, permanently changing its ecosystem. Compare the disappearance to draining an entire lake through a hole the width of a drill bit. Nature doesn't usually reverse a canal's current in an afternoon. This time, it just did. If any of these stuck with you a little longer than expected, hit subscribe. There's plenty more like this coming.